Have you ever wondered why some of the most promising treatments never make it to the doctor's office? You hear stories, you read testimonials, you see people getting better, but when you bring it up in a medical setting, it's shut down quickly. Why is that? Is it because the treatment is dangerous? Is it because the science is bad? Or is it because there's no money in it? This is where things start to get a little uncomfortable. In today's medical system, it's not always about what works, it's about what gets funded. And what gets funded isn't decided by your family doctor, it's decided by pharmaceutical companies, government agencies, and research institutions. Entities that often have more to gain from keeping you sick than helping you heal. Why is it so hard to study natural compounds, off-patent drugs, and regenerative therapies? And why does it seem like profit keeps winning out over progress? The real answer, the research monopoly. Here's the reality. Major corporations, Big Pharma, government health agencies, and large institutions ultimately decide what gets studied and what doesn't. If a treatment isn't patentable, controllable, profitable, or doesn't align with a political or public health agenda, it simply won't get the funding it needs for large-scale trials. So even if independent researchers, they see promising results, if they don't have massive institutional backing, their findings get buried. They simply can't afford the large-scale studies that move the needle in the mainstream. And what happens when a treatment that isn't profitable starts gaining attention? Well, there are three typical responses. First, it gets ignored. Researchers submit small-scale studies, but journals reject them for lack of evidence. And without journal publications, no major institution touches the research. A perfect example of this is peptides, exosomes, and stem cell therapies. Even though there's a growing body of anecdotal success stories, large-scale clinical trials are still extremely limited. Why? Because these are biological treatments, and they're really hard to patent, which means there's very little financial incentive for major funders to invest in them. So despite their massive therapeutic potential, access remains tightly restricted, and in some cases, outright suppressed. But not because they're ineffective. It's because there's just not enough formal research. The second thing that happens is they get attacked. Take compounds like nicotine, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, fenbendazole, or even methylene blue. Even when early data suggests they could be effective for things like long COVID, cancer, or neurological diseases, they're often dismissed as pseudoscience. Why is that? Because there's no profit motive to study them. And in some cases, proving their effectiveness could actually threaten the sale of a more patentable drug that's already on the market. The third thing that happens is that Big Pharma tweaks the formula. If a treatment shows real promise, corporations will often step in. They'll modify the molecule just enough to patent it and release a new drug. Right now, companies are already working on synthetic nicotine-like compounds. Not because it's more effective, but because it's easier to monetize. Here's the issue. Without major trials, doctors and policymakers won't take the research seriously, even if it is valid. This is the catch-22 of medical innovation. We can't recommend it because there's not enough research. We can't research it because no one will fund it. So we're left with a critical question. Are we prioritizing what actually helps people or what only makes profits? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like there's a nefarious chokehold on the system. One that keeps cheap and effective treatments from ever being seriously considered. Now, to be fair, I can't just blame Big Pharma. In all honesty, it's just human behavior. Most of us would rather complain about the problem than actually fix the problem. Let's play out the scenario. If you had an option to invest in a research study with no guarantee, maybe even an entire loss of your investment, or put that money into a mutual fund, real estate, bonds, or a high-yield savings account, which would you choose? I guess it really comes down to what matters most to you. Now you might be thinking, Jed, money doesn't matter to me. In fact, my health and my family, see, these are the things that are most important. Fair enough. So by that logic, investing in the experimental regenerative therapy seems like a no-brainer, right? But here's what I've learned about most people. It's far easier to complain about the system than it is to actually do something about it. I guess that's why we say actions speak louder than words, and where your money is, your heart will be also. So where is most of that money going? Well, let's take a look. As of 2023, about 83% of Canadian investors hold mutual funds and ETFs. 52% of US households own mutual funds. 44% of Canadian investors own individual stocks. 61% of US adults hold stocks either directly or through funds. 63% of Canadians over 50 have a TFSA. 58% have an RRSP. And 67% of US adults have some form of retirement asset, either a 401k, IRA, pensions, etc. That's regular people. People like you, me, and pretty much everyone else we know. So where's the majority of it going? Mostly into the S&P 500, which is made up of the 500 biggest US companies, and it represents over 80% of the total US stock market value. Now, you might be asking yourself, Jed, what does this have to do with healthcare? Or why should I care where people are investing their money? To answer the first one, it's complicated, but I'll get there. To answer the second one, I get it. Until a few years ago, I didn't care either. But after living through a global pandemic, and after years of watching friends, family, and other people I love suffer and even die, not just from chronic illnesses, but from medical negligence, I had to ask the question, why is this happening? And more importantly, why isn't anyone doing anything about it? And see, the more I asked, the more I began to understand. Let me enlighten you. Have you ever heard of BlackRock, Vanguard, or State Street, also known as the Big Three? Well, these are the largest asset management firms in the world, and collectively, they oversee assets totaling approximately $15 trillion. To put that in perspective, that's more than 3/4 the size of the entire US economy. A 2019 study published by the Harvard Business Review found that the Big Three are among the largest shareholders in 88% of S&P 500 companies. We're talking companies like Pfizer, companies like Johnson & Johnson, Google, PepsiCo, and many more. Now, you might be thinking, why does this matter? One word, influence. Because when you hold the majority of the wealth, you hold the majority of the influence. So how much influence are we really talking about? Let's take a look. First, they have massive stakes in almost everything. Pharmaceuticals, media, real estate, food, energy, you name it. And because of those holdings, they vote on board members, company policies, and even research priorities through their shareholder power. See, if their goal is to make money for their investors, and they have to choose between investing in a patentable, high-profit drug or an unpatentable, low-cost therapy, which one do you think gets funding? Second, they shape public opinion. See, the Big Three own large stakes in many of the major media outlets, and that means they decide what stories get covered and what stories don't. This is huge because when media corporations are financially tied to the same industries they report on, like pharmaceuticals, food, and healthcare, their ability to be fully objective, well, it's compromised. Think about it. If a promising alternative therapy comes along, but it threatens Big Pharma's profits, how likely is it that it'll get fair media coverage? Or let's say one of the major food companies they own is linked to major health risks. How aggressively do you think that story gets reported on? I don't fully know the answers to those questions, but when you take a step back and you look at it objectively, more often than not, the obvious answer is usually the right one. Now, if you've seen some of my earlier videos, you've heard me talk about some of the tactics that governments use to stay in power. They offer free things, which creates more government jobs and eventually leads to more taxes to fund it all. But who came up with the strategy to figure out where all the tax money would come from? You don't really think the government came up with it all on their own, do you? So who did then? Well, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. Don't believe me? Just take a look at their ESG policies, environmental, social, governance. It doesn't look like they're following some trend. It looks more like they're leading the charge. Back in 2021, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink sent a letter to CEOs of the companies where BlackRock holds significant shareholder power, urging them to align with the net zero emissions agenda by 2050 or risk losing BlackRock's investment support. Sounds less like leading and a little bit more like forcing to me. See, if the idea truly made sense, you wouldn't have to strong-arm anyone into compliance. A real leader casts a vision and inspires change. So what's really going on? Well, ESG isn't just a policy, it's a business model. It's sold to us as a moral duty, but behind the curtain, it's a gold mine. By 2023, ESG assets had grown to roughly $30 trillion from green projects like wind farms, solar fields, EV charging stations, and big corporate promises to green up factories. Let me give you an example. When a company like GE lands a $1.4 billion wind turbine deal from the US government, who do you think profits? The big three. That's right, I almost forgot. One of the ways that governments fund these expanding programs is through raising taxes. But when the green taxes weren't enough, they had to do something else. This time, they targeted corporate taxes and capital gains taxes. Now, I know what you're probably already thinking. Seems a little too complex for our bureaucratic friends to have figured out all on their own. Well, again, you're not wrong. Because here's the thing. The big three win even when corporate taxes go up. How? Market clout. Like I've said before, when you hold the majority of the wealth, you hold the majority of the influence. They lobby governments to push policies that protect their big players like Pfizer and Google and GE to keep them thriving. Meanwhile, higher corporate taxes crush smaller businesses, especially the ones that don't know how to or aren't willing to play the game. So what happens? Well, the smaller companies get pushed out and larger corporations stay standing. And how does this tie into the healthcare system? Well, when smaller private health clinics get squeezed out, the government simply steps in to fill the gap with more government jobs. These bloated government healthcare systems, they're extremely inefficient. They don't innovate. And why would they? They don't have to. They have no competition. There's no real incentive for them to take any kind of risk. And yes, it's incredibly frustrating, but we're not done yet. Because there's something else at play here. More government jobs means more pension funds. And who do you think manages all of these pension funds? Honestly, you can't even make this up. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. They serve as the primary asset managers for countless public pension systems, including those from federal employees, military personnel, and first responders. Where am I going with all this? Well, if the majority of us are investing into RRSPs, TFSAs, mutual funds, 401ks, then we're essentially becoming a cog in the wheel. We're stuck spinning this machine for the big three, instead of breaking free to fix what actually matters. Because here's the hard truth. By seeking a return on your investment, whether you realize it or not, you're unknowingly reinforcing a system that discourages research into alternative, low-cost medical treatments. This isn't some grand conspiracy. It's just how financial incentives work at scale. The system rewards investments that promise a high return, and non-patentable therapies, they simply don't fit that model. Please hear me out. I'm not telling you to pull all your money out of your retirement fund and invest it somewhere else. I'm also not saying that these large organizations, or even all pharmaceutical companies, are bad. In fact, I'm very grateful for many of the products and services that these companies provide. And I'm not saying we shouldn't invest in protecting the environment either. I love spending time in nature, and I believe we're called to cultivate and cherish the earth. But here's the danger. Without the right priority sequence, even good things can lead us off course. See, for me, God is God, not money and not nature. Both are tools meant to point us towards God and to help us serve our fellow man. So what am I saying? Put your money where your mouth is. If you want things to change, don't just complain about it, do something about it. See, the system won't change itself. And the people profiting from it, they have no reason to fix it. But that doesn't mean we're powerless. The future belongs to those who refuse to accept the status quo. See, if you're not getting the answers you deserve, do your own research, get a second opinion, and be your own advocate. Start simple, buy better food, stop chasing quick fixes, and spend less on drugs that only mask symptoms and invest in solutions that address the root causes. Because at the end of the day, your money is your vote. Use it wisely. Now you might be thinking, Jed, I'm in, but where should I be investing my money if I want to optimize my health? Well, that's exactly where we're going next. In the next episode, we're going to dive into one of the most debated and promising areas of healthcare today, stem cell therapy. And we're going to unpack why this highly controversial treatment has become the gold standard in regenerative medicine. We'll break down what's real, what's hype, and why this field has become both one of the most promising and one of the most heavily attacked areas in modern healthcare. And I'll share with you why I personally believe It's one of the best investments you can make when it comes to your health. You don't want to miss it. If you found this video helpful and you want to see more like it, feel free to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We can't win this fight without people like you. While you're here, feel free to check out the other videos on my page. Now, if you're looking into how regenerative medicine could help you or someone you love, then head over to my website and book a consult with me directly. If you're ready to explore real solutions, this could be a great place to start.